Hello everyone, it's 11 a.m. right now, so we will officially begin. Firstly, a very warm welcome to ApsaraChat Live. I'm Yan Han from the marketing team here at Alibaba Cloud, and I will be your host for today's webinar. For those of you who have tuned into our very first live webinar last month, hello once again. And for those of you who are new to our live webinar series, a very warm welcome to our family. So our ApsaraChat Live series is an interactive one, so don't be shy. Feel free to ask any questions along the way if you have any for our speakers. As you can see from your own view, there is also a chat box icon where you can drop comments or questions along the way. And due to the scale of this webinar, all of you attendees are muted by default to minimize distraction. But like I mentioned as well, there is a chat box icon. Just feel free to drop your comments along the way. So for today's live webinar session, we have two cloud security experts here with us. Firstly, we have Andrew Milroy, Head of Advisory Services from Ovum. Hello, Andrew.
Hi there, Yan.
Hey, and then next we have Suman Saurav, Vice President of Lazada Group, Security Architecture and Projects. Hello, Suman.
Hello, everyone.
All right, thank you both for coming and attending our webinar. And if those of you who are here for our previous live webinar, we posed a question to you guys and asked, what were some of your top considerations when it comes to picking your cloud service provider? And a highly voted one, which was not surprising as well, and that was data security. So you know what? We heard you. So we roped in two cloud security experts today, especially for this webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Andrew, Head of Advisory Services from Ovum, who will talk about the APAC trends in cybersecurity. So Andrew, please. I'm just going to stop.
Okay, thank you, Yan. I'll start sharing.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so good morning and good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm delighted to be here, and I'd just like to thank the folks at Alibaba Cloud for giving me the opportunity to present on trends in cybersecurity, specifically around cloud. So just to give you a little bit of background, it's not that people are aware of a lot of the cybersecurity challenges that are out there. Cybersecurity has been in the headlines for some time. It's not that people are kind of new to this topic. However, the type of IT implementations that enterprises have are changing. And what we have seen over the last few years is a very rapid uptake of cloud computing solutions by all kinds of enterprises for all kinds of workloads. And this brings together a new set of cybersecurity challenges that need to be addressed. At Ovum, we do research into this area, among other things. So Ovum is a research and analyst firm that focuses in technology. Cybersecurity is one of those areas. And we talk to a lot of enterprises about cybersecurity challenges and how they address them, as well as other things. We also talk to the suppliers. So this gives us an idea of what's really going on. So what I'll do in this presentation is really just give you an idea of some of the issues around cloud cybersecurity and some of the implications and some of the best practices in addressing challenges associated with cybersecurity in the cloud. So just moving on to the first slide. As folks know, cybersecurity has been in the headline for some time. We've in this region, we've had some big cybersecurity issues. Most of you are probably aware of the Sing Health cybersecurity attack. There have also been, famous global ones like Yahoo and Capital One, among others. There have been some very famous ransomware attacks like NotPetya, for example, and WannaCry, that a lot of people in our industry are very familiar with. But what has been happening recently is we've seen more cybersecurity attacks on clouds making the headlines. And if I focus on our region, there have been a few very significant ones recently. So for example, Melinda Air recently had a customer data breach, and this was of data that was stored in a cloud-based environment. True in Thailand also faced some challenges with attacks on its cloud-based environment. And as we move towards more distributed cloud, 5G type environments, we will start facing new kinds of threats, and we need to be aware of them, and we need to make sure that our cybersecurity posture moves in line with these new architectures that we roll out, which will be predominantly cloud-based. So just moving on to a bit of research. So zooming right into threats associated with cloud environments. So we asked enterprises in Asia Pacific, what they believed the major threats were associated with the cloud environments. Number one was insecure interfaces and APIs. And as a lot of you probably know, when people use clouds, they like to make those clouds available for applications like SAP and other applications to write to those clouds, to interface with those clouds, to be integrated with those clouds. So typically a lot of applications need access to open APIs or connectors to APIs to work and integrate with clouds. And this is a point of vulnerability because often these APIs are not sufficiently protected, and the general cloud interfaces, cloud access is often not significantly protected. And this is something that we need to be aware of in our cloud environments, which are often, as we would describe, multi-cloud environments. Other significant threats that emerge are data breaches and data losses. A lot of them are to do with vulnerabilities associated with APIs. Advanced persistent threats, where malicious actors and hackers just focus repeatedly on getting into a system using all manner of different techniques to get there, and focus only on that particular server, and eventually through trying numerous ways of getting in, find a vulnerability. This is another big issue associated with clouds. A lack of a unified view of assets is also a big one. As I mentioned, a lot of the time enterprises have multi-cloud environments where they have private clouds, multiple public clouds, and sometimes on-premise too, all working together. And they may have multiple solutions to address vulnerabilities or security threats in each of those environments, but often don't have a holistic view of everything that is going on. And this is something that is, I think, a very big issue for people as they adopt cloud technology. Identity and access management is another big one. I mean, again, it's associated with some of the other challenges and threats we've talked about, but basically getting into a system by posing as an employee or posing as a customer and using that system as a vehicle for malicious activity, a cloud environment. And denial of service attacks. This is actually, in many conversations we have, this one, sometimes more prominent. Distributed denial of service attacks are becoming a bigger and bigger challenge associated with cloud and multi-cloud environments and IoT environments connected to clouds. So what we're finding is people, getting ways into clouds and using those clouds as a way of launching distributed denial of service attacks on other systems. That's one of the challenges. But the other denial of service threat is just using multiple things as a way of attacking clouds. And we have seen that with some recent instances of multiple consumer devices, security cameras, and so on being hacked into and used to attack cloud-based systems. So that's just to give you a kind of background on some of the main, main challenges, cybersecurity challenges associated with cloud computing. We've also done, research and asked people, what they think, is driving their cybersecurity posture. And we found that nearly 60% of organizations believe that their need for security services in the next 12 months will be driven by cloud computing. Of course, there are other things like mobility, big data, Internet of Things that are having, a big impact too. But as you may be aware, in many of the Asian economies, there is this very rapid migration to cloud technology that's taking place now. It's been slow to kick off. We've been talking about cloud computing for a long time now, and people have always expressed concerns. Very often, security has been a #1 concern for migrating to the cloud. But we are now just seeing, wholesale huge workloads shift to the cloud, cloud first policies that companies are having. So they only do non-cloud when there's a very good reason for it. So they basically have to, assess cloud options for running their workloads before any other option is put in place. So just moving on to some other research we've done that's worth highlighting. So, we asked enterprises the extent to which they believe cybersecurity bundled with cloud services by cloud providers prepares them for cybersecurity threats. So this is when you use a public cloud and there's a security offering with that. And what we found is most enterprises, believe that prepares them for cybersecurity threats. Now, to some extent, this is correct. I guess if you're using one cloud environment, that's a good enough kind of assumption to have. But if you're using multiple clouds, you need to look beyond this. So you need to be able to have ways of securing the traffic that's moving between the clouds. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the key threats was a unified view, and you need a unified view of all of these cloud-related assets. So that's not to say that there's anything wrong with it. It's often best practice security that a cloud service provider will give you, but it's localized usually to that particular cloud. There are efforts that are being made to offer solutions that can have a view of and address the security of other public clouds from one cloud. And these solutions are taking off, but these are the kinds of solutions that enterprises need to consider more and more, because a lot of them are using multiple clouds. Which brings me to the key point here. You really need a single console or a single dashboard unified view. And this is a kind of nirvana in a way. It's actually very challenging to have this across all cloud environments, but it's what enterprises are moving towards and what a lot of the cybersecurity solution providers are now looking to offer. So often we will find some public cloud providers can say, we can help you have a view of our cloud and some other compatible clouds, and then you can work at developing connectors to other clouds, but it's often a customized activity. But still, a lot of organizations don't have this fully in place. But beyond public clouds, you've got to also look at hosted private clouds. A lot of the biggest enterprises in the world have a mix of public cloud. They may have multiple public clouds. They'll have hosted private clouds. So that is basically where it's a dedicated cloud for that organization that is hosted off-premise. And it's very likely they've also got some cloud infrastructure on-premise as well as some legacy on-premise non-cloud infrastructure. So a lot of the big banks, a lot of the big traditional organizations that have been around for a long time have this kind of heterogeneous technology environment, and they really need a single unified dashboard. That's the dream, that's the nirvana of all of this infrastructure, to be able to see what is happening. Rather than what is very often the case, rather than having lots and lots of individual solutions that don't always talk to each other. So just to move on to how we're developing from a cloud environment, we're starting to see more and more distributed clouds. So we're starting to see clouds moving more towards the edge as we see Internet of Things implementations and edge computing start to take off. And this creates new security challenges. Perhaps I shouldn't call them new, because a lot of people will be familiar with the Mirai botnet, and the Mirai botnet was in 2016, and this is where some hackers were able to hack into a load of consumer devices a lot of IoT devices, some cameras as well, security cameras were part of this, and basically launch very, very large scale distributed denial of service attacks from these infected Internet of Things devices. And they brought down a lot of the internet infrastructure in the East Coast of the United States. It was a very well publicized attack, but it showed us the power of launching DDoS, or distributed denial of service attacks, from IoT devices and how feasible this is. Because basically in this more distributed world that we're starting to move towards, where we have more connected devices at the edge and more clouds, multiple clouds and distributed clouds, we're basically opening ourselves up to having a lot more points of vulnerability, way more ways that malicious actors can get into systems. And this needs to be addressed, because it's a big challenge, because a lot of the skills required for doing this are limited. The cost of doing this is significant. So this is where we're seeing a lot of artificial intelligence and automation come in. You know, just ways of looking for any kind of irregular activity in the system. And when irregular activity of any sort is identified, then being able to pick up on this and zoom in on it and address it. I mean, other considerations as we move to this more distributed environment is, you know, vandalism of physical devices. You know, so with 5G, with more and more radio access networks out in the public domain, you know, in some parts of the world, they're subject to being vandalized or stolen. Similarly, with a lot of smart city applications where we have devices spread around the city, again, they're subject to physical vandalism. Now, these are just, you know, considerations that need to be taken into account, you know, as we move into this more distributed kind of world. So these are the kind of things we expect to see more of in the future, on top of some of the existing cloud security challenges that we've identified. So just, you know, again, one of the, you know, key points that need to be addressed is, it's not that people are ignoring security. You know, most enterprises are onto it. You know, it's a critical issue. It's top of the list of priorities. But what they often tend to do is, when there's a problem, they deploy new tools to combat this new problem. And what this does is it creates effectively an estate of siloed security services or security solutions, which can become a major management challenge in its own right. Indeed, it can become a security challenge. So just having so many different solutions out there, because you think, oh, we've got this very specific you know, problem associated with intrusion and access management, we'll get a very specific type of solution to address it. Or we have this very specific challenge associated with a certain type of IoT device, we'll get a very specific type of solution to address it. So, you know, so as you can imagine, as you do this, it has a big implication on applying security, you know, security policies across these different kinds of environments and solutions. And when we have these new kinds of rollouts, we have multiple use cases as well, right? So you're looking at situations where you need different security policies for different kinds of environments and different kinds of bits of technology. So if you think about an Internet of Things implementation, there may be some where there's a very, very you know, big need for battery power. And that battery power has an impact on, say, authentication or re-authentication. It has to be traded off you know, against some security challenges. So that's one use case. And then you may have, you know, a very specific cloud data storage requirement where privacy is key. You've got to be completely compliant with PDPA or GDPR. And that is something that is critical to your organization. So you have to have very specific policies around that particular data set. So to my point is you need to have multiple security postures for different kinds of use cases and application environments that you're working with, which creates this huge complexity. And on top, so what we're saying is you need to have a view of all of this, ultimately, and that's a major challenge, a view of all of it. You don't want to have a situation where you've got these multiple policies, multiple approaches, multiple technologies, and you've got all these kind of incoming messages, and you have a situation where you have security alert fatigue. So the unified view is a very important thing to consider, and addressing security tool proliferation is a very big issue. So what are, some of the best practices moving forward? So our view on this is that it's very, very important for organizations to ensure they have a unified view of all clouds and the traffic moving between those clouds. It's important to ensure that your tools allow you to continuously monitor that traffic that's moving around. And a very important part of this is automation and artificial intelligence, because it's going to be very difficult to do all of this manually using depending on individuals to track a lot of this activity and to respond appropriately to every single alert that comes in. Cloud and virtualization are redefining the network perimeter. So cloud and virtualization require us to ensure that our cybersecurity posture scales up for capacity and scales out to deal with this move towards the edge. Ensure that this cybersecurity posture can adapt to the moving network perimeter and the wider adoption of new technologies. So it's a very important thing to consider, because you don't want to be in a situation where security becomes a bottleneck to this ability to scale up for capacity and scale out for capabilities at the edge. Strengthening APIs, API security, distributed denial of service security, and intrusion and access management security are key areas that we've identified in our research. So you need to increasingly use automation and AI to identify and address vulnerabilities. And to give you some very, very tactical advice, I mean, a lot of people are on top of this, but certainly the use of tokens, encryptions, and signatures need to be used more heavily to further secure interfaces and application and APIs. Adopting cybersecurity solutions that protect connected assets and the moving perimeter is key. So, we've addressed some of the big issues. We could go into detail around each one of them, but overall it is important to adopt cybersecurity solutions that can give you this overall view and enable you to have your posture move with the changing perimeter and have a view of all of your connected assets that are increasingly cloud-based today. So on that note, thank you very much for your attention. I believe we will be having a Q&A session after the next presentation from Lazada. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Andrew. Yep, I think I saw a question or two, which we will address.
Delighted to take questions now if we have some.
I think we'll save it for later. We'll save it for later.
Okay.
Give me a moment. So yeah, anyway, once again, thank you, Andrew, for giving us such an in-depth insight on the trend seen in the APAC region, and also sharing with us, on some of the best practices when it comes to protecting your data and also enhancing your security. Andrew also shared with us, some of the top threats faced by various organizations these days, which I'm sure our next speaker can relate to some of them too. So now I will pass on my time to Suman, who will share with us on some of Lazada's best cloud security practices in this dynamic and ever-changing e-commerce space. So Suman, please.
Thanks, Jan.
Yeah, I think, Andrew, you got to stop sharing your screen first.
Good. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
Let me know once you see my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Depends on where you are located. So today, I'm going to give some brief summary of some of the e-commerce security and what are the challenges and how we are overcoming with those challenges by using the cloud security solutions. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to cover what is the ecosystems in the e-commerce, what is the data security framework, what are the security controls which we are expecting or which we are implementing in data security framework, and how couple of we are using the Alibaba security solutions to implement those security controls. So to start with, first we have to understand the e-commerce ecosystem data lifecycle. It's quite a complex. We have six component and the e-commerce, the basic six component. One is the Lazada, which provides the platform for all the sellers to use it to sell their goods. Then we have a second component, the sellers. The third one is the warehouse, the logistics, distribution, and the consumers. So this whole six uh, actors who make these ecosystems, when the customer purchases an order on these platforms, it goes to the sellers to process the order. The seller check the warehouses about all the inventory which they are managing it. From there, it goes to the logistic. From the logistic, it goes to the distribution, and from the distribution, it goes to the consumer. So that's how this data travels across this from the order received to order fulfillment, right? If you see in these ecosystems, all these sellers, warehouses, logistics, or distribution, all these partners, they are using their own application or their own infrastructure, and sometimes it's integrated with the Lazada infrastructure, so that we can build a collaborative ecosystem to fulfill the customer order. So that's why it's very important for us to have this complex system managed in a way that we can implement the data security in a way, scalable way. And also we have the full visibility of where this data is traveling across these ecosystems. Why the security is very important in the e-commerce industry? First of all, the customers' data. We are dealing with lots of customers' data, specifically the PII information. So it's very important for us to protect the customer data. The regulatory requirements, as you must be aware that there are some regulatory requirements in each country across Southeast Asia and Europe as well. So like Singapore, we have the Singapore Personal Data Protection Act. So we have to ensure that the customer's data which is coming, which is processing inside the ecosystem, it has to be protected, right? So that's why it's very important for us to comply with the regulatory requirements. The third one is the fraud prevention. So in the e-commerce, the way the e-commerce industry is booming up, we every day we see the lots of fraud cases which is coming up. So we have to ensure that our customers are not a victim of these frauds. So we have to implement those security controls in place to prevent these kind of frauds to our customers. And the last one is a forensic investigation. So in case if let's say if there's any security incident happen, we have to ensure that we have the proper evidence logs in the place to do the forensic investigation, what has happened wrong and where it has happened wrong. So these are the couple of things, the basic objective of building the e-commerce security. Now, to build this whole four objective, to achieve this whole four objective, we have to build a structured framework, that security framework. So this is the data sharing security framework, basically how this data is being shared across these ecosystem partners. So you see on the bottom line, we have the technology, and on top of it, there's a governance, which take care of the policy, assessment, compliance, and then training is also a part. And then we have the gateway, which secures, which ensures that all the partners, all the ecosystem integration is going through a data security gateway. And then we have the data ecosystems, which is the seller center, open API, warehouse management, logistics. Basically, these are the systems which we do. I explained in the first slide. And then our business ecosystem, the partners who sell their goods on the platform. We have the brands, we have the ISVs, the independent software vendors who integrate with the platform, and all these sellers are using these ISVs. And then we have 3PLs, basically the third party logistics. So if you see the whole from the business ecosystem, from the data sharing ecosystem to the security technology, it's a whole framework which is important, and each and every component in this framework is very important and plays an important role to build this business. So what is the purpose of this data security sharing security framework? The first one is to build a scalable approach. So because the way the e-commerce is booming up, every day we are dealing with millions and millions of customer data. So that's why we need a framework which can be scale up very fast. Also, the collaborative effort. So it's not just the responsibility of one actor in this ecosystem. So each and every actor plays a very important to build the security across this ecosystem. So that's why we have ensure that each and every pillar or actor in the systems plays their role very carefully. And the third one is very important one, that the ecosystem which is there in the e-commerce has to be a trusted partner ecosystem. Means all the partners which is coming in the systems has to be trusted, so as security checks, compliance, and the assessment before they have any they plays any important role, or they have any access to these ecosystem data. So this is the overall framework. So on the bottom line in the security technology, it's basically on the Lazada side, we have the Alibaba Group security solutions. Then we have the Alibaba Cloud security solutions, which is we are using in our day-to-day life. And then we have some internal solutions. Basically, every organization you see, they have some internal requirement to fulfill the internal process, to support the internal process. So that's why it's not always you rely on the commercial solution, or you rely on just the cost solution, but sometimes you have to develop your own internal solution to fulfill the requirements which suits your organization. So that's why very important to build those kind of internal solutions as well, right? Now, if you see what we are expecting, specifically on the data leakage prevention. So in the data leakage protection, we have two main objectives. First, to build the maturity across the ecosystem over the time. And the second thing, which is the security operations, means once you build the framework, once you build the whole ecosystem, you have to make sure that you are monitoring these systems continuously for any kind of data leakage, right? And that's where we have three main subset of these ecosystem which is build up. The first one is the data security maturity model. So we have to ensure that what kind of data we are dealing with, what is the criticality of the data. Based on that, we build the security controls across the data systems, right? So it's very important that we prioritize, we classify the data, what kind of data we are dealing with, and how to treat that kind of data across the ecosystems. Second one is the data analytics, because the amount of data which is coming in this ecosystem is so huge that the manual effort is almost impossible. So that's where the data analytics comes in picture, where we analyze the data, so the algorithm, and then we make sure that we are getting the right set of metrics from these data. And the data privacy, where if let's say how to ensure that the security controls are in place to protect or to have this data privacy regulatory requirements are implemented. And also in case if there's any leakage, how to respond on those incidents. So if you see, the data leakage protection is about the two things: how you build the maturity over the time, and then once you build it, how you make sure that your day to day, how you're monitoring those data leakage if there is any data leakage. So this is the basic principle or fundamentals behind this data leakage protection. Now, what are the basic things which we are expecting from any of the partners in these ecosystems? First of all is the secure data. We have to ensure that all the partners or in the ecosystem, all the actors are have the adequate security controls in place. Second one is a secure architecture. So the security architecture, because that's a fundamental. If the whole application and the infrastructure is not properly designed with the thought of security in mind, most likely it's not a scalable framework and not a secure framework. So we have to ensure the security architecture of this whole ecosystem is very well defined. A scalable framework. Also, the build maturity. So we know that there are certain cases where the system does not have the maturity in the first place when it comes, but what we expect that over the time they build the maturity with the security controls in place. And then the cost reduction. It's very important. Sometimes we have seen that lots of solutions comes in market and they say, most of the time the management says to invest in security is very costly. So we have to make sure that we build a trade-off between how much security we need and what is the cost of return of investment on these security solutions. So we have to take a judgment call. What is the what security controls are required and how much cost is required to implement those security, instead of putting all these things in like full-fledged security, right? And the last one, which is very important one, is the security awareness. So any actors who is in this ecosystem has to go through a basic security awareness training. Depends on the what kind of data they are dealing with. So this is very important that we have seen from last couple of years. We are seeing there are lots of internal threats are coming, and that's why it's very important, especially the non-technical people. They are tend to do some accidental mistakes, right? So we have to make sure that they are aware about these basic security principles. What are the like phishing attack, those kind of things they are aware about. So they've gone through all the security awareness training, the basic security awareness training. So this is what our expectation when we build this ecosystem. Now, as we see in the news, in the press release, there are lots of the companies are talking about the data analytics, security algorithm. So same way, each organization, it's not like the one algorithm fit for all. So each organization has to develop their own data analytics engine. If they have the data analytics engine, they have to build their own security algorithm on on consideration that what kind of metrics they're expecting, what kind of data or what kind of data they're expecting to come in, right? So if you see from the security side, where these security issues are coming. So we have a vulnerability management, we have the security response center, we have identity and access management, we have anti-DDoS, web application firewall, we have continuous monitoring and testings. So all these data which comes combined together in the one data analytics database, and then there's a qualitative assessment records which also coming together in the same database. Based on all these data, when we run the security algorithm, we know that what could be the possible threat, and also if there is any incident, what is the priority of those incidents, whether it's a P1, P2, and P3. So considering the kind of data in the ecosystem which is coming and the processing day-to-day basis, we need a very solid, very accurate algorithm to deal with these kind of data. That's why apart from the security solutions you are adding in, you're purchasing or you are building your own, but apart from all this, this is a very backbone of any security response or security analytics is a very important part of this ecosystem. If you ask me to divide these security controls in a different segment, we have divided in 6. So first one is the network and host security. The second one is the security architecture. Basically, it deals with the security requirements for the technical configuration provided by the cloud platform to detect the common kind of attacks. The data protection to prevent the unauthorized access of data at rest, data in transit, and data in processing using the adequate security controls. So that's one of the very basic fundamentals which we use. And then I have seen that lots of people ignore about the application security issues, and that's where you see that nowadays the attack coming on the application side is very well, and in fact it's going fast because most of the management side of people are not aware about the application security, because since the beginning the network security, the endpoint security has been highlighted very much in the market, and application security was never given too much attention. But last couple of years, we have seen the application security vulnerabilities are coming up. So that's why we have to ensure that all the applications which is developing to serve this ecosystem in the e-commerce has gone through the application security, fundamental security checks, whether it could be the code review, could be the threat modeling, or it's a penetration testing, vulnerability scanning. So there is a whole ecosystem of application security. The scannings and everything is fall under this bucket. The security awareness, as I already explained, any actors in this ecosystem has to go through a basic security awareness training. And if you are talking about the non-technical people, the security awareness training is totally different. But when we talk about the secure tech people, technical people, they have to go through the security awareness. Plus, if there's a developer, they have to go through the security coding training. If there's a QA, has to go through the security testing training, so that they all knows the fundamental of security across the ecosystem. And the last but not least is the security management. Andrew was talking about in slide that there has to be a unified dashboard where you can manage everything and you have the proper visibility of each and everything what is in their ecosystem, right? Same way we use, I echo his statement. So considering those, we have the security management, which give us a proper visibility, what is happening in which part of these ecosystems, and also what is the current security posture of any of these, whether it's an endpoint, whether it's a network, or whether it's an application, what is the current security posture of that component in this ecosystems. And it's very easy if we have the unified dashboard to manage, to transparent, and to have to visible the exact security metrics to the management. It helps us to do the right investment in the right direction. So once we know what is happening across the ecosystem. Now, if what I have seen mostly when we talk to the partners and when we talk to the even though inside there are lots of challenges which they are facing in terms of implementing in the private cloud or implementing in the private data center. So when we started using the Alibaba Cloud solution, it's very easy to scale up. It's very easy to implement, and that's why today I just want to go through a couple of the Alibaba Cloud solution, as I have shown in my previous sets, that the security technology, Alibaba Cloud security solution is a very important element in our security solution, right? So I'll just go with a couple of things. The security controls, which I have explained in the previous slide. So this is the overall security solutions which Alibaba Cloud provides, and we are using most of them. So on the front line, as an e-commerce platform, it's very important that we protect from the DDoS attack, specifically when it goes to the campaign, doing 11/11 sales, 12/12 sales. So those times when the traffic is very high, and each and every moment is important, every second is important for our partners, for our sellers, for our buyers. So we have to make sure that the platform is available 24/7. And that's why the DDoS mitigation is very important. Same time, the application firewall, centralized security operation, application data protection, all these elements which are part of the Alibaba Cloud security solutions are playing an important role in building the ecosystem of the e-commerce security, right? And I'll go with a couple of them in the next slide. But on the front layer, the DDoS, web application protection, firewalls, and on the data security side, the data encryption. The data which is coming on the database has to be encrypted with a proper encryption algorithm. The data recovery, data integrity, key management is also an important part. Then the physical security, hardware security, which is taken care of by the Alibaba the cloud data centers. But on the, if you see on the other part of like authentication, authorization, these are the key elements which is sometimes when we see the partners when they try to build their own customized authentication or identity and access management, there are lots of mistakes they tend to do. So that's why it's very important to use the solution which is very well tested by the best industry best people. So that's why we use the one which is already proven their the security capability. So that's why the authentication, authorization, all these the basic fundamentals solutions which has been built on the Alibaba Cloud security is very easy to use. In terms of the anti-DDoS, you see the screenshot which is on the screen right now. The anti-DDoS, we have seen there are lots of DDoS attack coming mostly during the campaign time. So that's where this is a sample data. This is not the real-time data. For sure, we cannot present it, but this is sample data how this Alibaba anti-DDoS protection works on the real time, and it prevents the anti-DDoS attack very well. On the application web application firewall side, the applications which is we have seen the cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and there are lots of other vulnerabilities which developers tend to do the mistake, and they need some time to fix those issues. In those cases, web application firewall is very an important plays and very important role. At least it gives you the first layer of defense from the application security attack. And in the same time, the developers, when they mitigate and they remediate the issues, you can deploy the new code, and that's where the web application firewall plays a very important role by adding a first layer of defense in your perimeter. Anti-bots. This is very important for the e-commerce. When we in the e-commerce platform, it's very important for any e-commerce platform to know that the order which is coming in the platform are the genuine orders. It's not orders which is placed by the bot, right? So we have to ensure that all the requests which is coming on the platform are protected by these anti-bots technology, and that's where this Alibaba security solution is very good in identifying what are the genuine requests and what are the requests coming from the bots, right? And the last one, which is very important and which we use day-to-day basis, the unified security center, where, as I said, what is not transparent is not visible, right? So we have to ensure that the transparency is there when, especially on the security team, we should know that what is the current security posture of any elements on this ecosystems. What kind of attack we are seeing it, what are the vulnerabilities which are open, and what are the vulnerabilities we have to protect, what are the security incidents are coming. So each and every element of the security metrics should be visible to the security, not just the team, but to the management. It helps us to do the right investment, to know that where we have to invest on the technology side, where we have to invest on the people side, and where we have to invest on the process side. So these security dashboards are very important, and I think the Alibaba Cloud Security Center has this built up very well, where you can see the visibility across all your systems, the score, the maturity, everything you can see on this dashboard. So I think I like this dashboard a lot, specifically as a security person. You want to see what is happening in your ecosystem, right? So if you ask me to conclude the whole e-commerce security, I would say first thing, we should avoid the false sense of security. I have seen people who will just say, okay, we have implemented this, but whether you have implemented it correctly, whether you have all this segregation, whether you have tested it, it's very important that we should implement the solution which has been tested very well, and it's there. So that's very important. The data leakage prevention, as I said, it's very important for any e-commerce solution, e-commerce company, that that we have the adequate data leakage protection in place. And as I said, the kind of data, the amount of data we are deal in the e-commerce nowadays, it's very huge. So the manual thing is very impossible to implement. So we have to use some of the artificial intelligence algorithm to monitor these sensitive data leakage. The third one is the continuous monitoring. So we have to ensure that what are the actors, especially exposed to the public internet, are continuously getting monitored for all kind of attack, 0 days, or any kind of DDoS or any kind of anti-bots. So we have to ensure that everything is in place to do the continuous monitoring. And as I said, it's very difficult right now in the market to hire very qualified security professionals. So the automation is the key. In fact, the whole industry is moving towards the automation, and same way the security is also moving towards the automation to automate the lots of things which we can use to do manually in the past. And the last one is the data access. So we have to ensure that data, all the data are classified based on the category. We provide a need to know approach, to give the data access to anyone in the ecosystem, whether it's a person, whether it's a system, or whether it's an application. So we have to ensure that how the data is getting the access. And to implement the access control metrics with all logs are monitored, because when any doing the regulatory inspection and audit, the auditors will ask all those logs to give the evidence if anything happened, or if how you have implemented the security in the data access side. So this is very important, all these things in the e-commerce security. I think that's it. Probably this is my last slide. So Jan, handing over to you if we have any QA.
All right, thank you so much, Suman. Opening up the floor for the Q&A session. I think someone asked Andrew something on I think Emily, I think Andrew already answered your question. And I've got a couple of questions for our panelists as well. So for Andrew, why do you think there is such an increase in DDoS attacks in cloud environments?
Okay, that's a good question. I think the reason for it is there are just so many more devices out there and points of vulnerability for attackers to get into. So, you know, if you look at the number of things that we think there are going to be by the year 2023 or 2024, people are talking about 24, 25, 26 billion internet connected devices being out and about. So that's, you know, 24, 25, 26 billion potential points of vulnerability. Now today, I think we're looking at what, 8 billion, something like that. So it's just a very rapidly increasing number of points of vulnerability that can be hacked into. And then once these are hacked into, you know, a botnet can be created and a cloud can be attacked, because a lot of people's critical infrastructure now sits in the cloud. So obviously it opens the cloud up to that vulnerability. So that's one angle, that's the cloud being attacked. The other one is because of some of these insecure APIs we talked about and some of this, you know, security that's perhaps not as strong as it could be, it is, you know, it's possible for people to hack into cloud environments and then launch attacks from that cloud against other clouds or against other systems. So it's I guess it's just the increasing number of clouds that are out there, the increasing number of things there that are creating more opportunities for the hackers.
All right. Thank you for sharing that insight. And also in
Or
your
to be,
present,
to be specific for DDoS,
Yeah.
creating more opportunities for DDoS attacks.
Sure. And also, you know, Andrew, you mentioned that, like, you know, some of the top threats that were faced in, you know, today's world. So for Suman, for Lazada, what are some of the biggest cybersecurity threats you guys face?
I said the DDoS is the one which is we see in the day-to-day life. Also, the anti-bots, we see quite a lot anti-bots requests, the bots request. And Andrew has mentioned about the API security, which I agree with. The API, we have seen the developers are posting the secret keys of the API in the GitHub public repository, and we have seen a lot. So yeah, it's quite challenging, especially all these three areas for us to manage it very well.
All right. Thank you so much, Suman, for sharing that too. And, you know, due to the lack of time, unfortunately, we'll be ending our Q&A session over here. So thank you everyone for your participation and also questions. And I would also like to, you know, thank our two wonderful speakers, Andrew and Suman, for their time and, you know, their valuable insights. And with that, this marks the end of our second ApsaraChat Live Webinar series. We hope all of you learned a thing or two on cloud security today, and thank you for being a part of this. And I hope to see all of you in our next session. So goodbye and happy holidays.